The first gunshot echoed through the rain-soaked streets of downtown Chicago just seconds after Mayor Olivia Bennett stepped out of the black SUV, and for one frozen moment nobody moved, because nobody understood where the sound had come from, or why a homeless-looking street cleaner, wearing a faded orange sanitation jacket, had suddenly thrown himself directly in front of the mayor while blood splashed across the wet pavement beneath the city lights, and as terrified screams erupted around the crowded charity event outside the historic Palmer House Hotel. The old man pressed one shaking hand against his bleeding shoulder while keeping his eyes locked on the rooftop across the street where the sniper had hidden in the darkness. And before the Secret Service agents even realized what was happening, the old cleaner grabbed the mayor by the arm and dragged her behind a concrete divider, just as the second bullet shattered the glass doors behind them. Before this story begins, take a second to like and subscribe, because sometimes the people the world ignores are the same. People quietly saving lives when nobody else can. 3 months earlier, nobody in Chicago knew the name Daniel Brooks anymore. To most people, he was just another forgotten old man pushing a rusted sanitation cart through cold alleyways before sunrise, quietly sweeping cigarette butts, broken bottles, and fast food wrappers from sidewalks that businessmen walked across without ever looking down. The city had thousands of invisible people like him, men and women who existed only in the corners of crowded streets, unnoticed beneath glowing skyscrapers and endless traffic noise. But Daniel carried himself differently, and if anyone had bothered paying attention, they would have noticed the strange discipline in the way he moved, the calmness in his eyes, and the quiet alertness that never seemed to fade even when exhaustion hung over him like a storm cloud. Every morning at 4:30, long before the city fully woke up, Daniel walked out of the tiny motel room he rented on the south side and headed toward downtown, with a thermos of black coffee tucked beneath his arm. The motel smelled of old smoke, damp carpet, and loneliness, and the flickering neon sign outside buzzed constantly through the night like a dying insect. His room contained almost nothing except a narrow bed, a wooden chair beside the window, and a small locked metal box hidden beneath the mattress that nobody had ever seen him open. Most people assumed Daniel was homeless or mentally broken because he rarely spoke unless necessary. But the truth was buried beneath years of silence that nobody around him could imagine. Daniel Brooks had once been one of the most respected special operations soldiers in the United States Army. 15 years earlier, his photograph had hung proudly inside military offices beside medals awarded for bravery during classified missions overseas. But war has a cruel way of destroying even the strongest men slowly and quietly, piece by piece, until eventually all that remains is exhaustion hiding inside human skin. Daniel had survived combat zones, hostage rescues, ambushes, and explosions that should have killed him. But nothing damaged him more deeply than the night he lost his wife, Emily, and their young daughter, Sophie, in a drunk driving accident while he was deployed overseas. He still remembered the phone call. He still remembered falling to his knees in the dirt outside a military tent while helicopters roared somewhere above him in the darkness. After that night, something inside him simply stopped living. He retired from the Army 2 years later, disappeared from everyone who knew him, and drifted through cities across America, carrying grief that never loosened its grip around his chest. Chicago became the place where he finally stopped running, not because he loved the city, but because it was large enough for broken people to disappear inside. And for years, that was exactly what he wanted, to disappear. The only person who truly spoke to Daniel anymore was a 10-year-old girl named Lily Carter, who waited every afternoon outside a small convenience store near West Monroe Street while her exhausted mother worked double shifts at a nearby diner. Lily wore oversized hoodies, carried books everywhere she went, and possessed the kind of innocent curiosity that somehow survives even in hard neighborhoods where childhood disappears too early. The first time she spoke to Daniel, snow had been falling heavily across the city. While he swept ice from the sidewalk outside the store, Lily had walked over quietly and asked, "Why do you always look at rooftops?" Daniel paused mid-sweep. Most adults never notice that, but she had. Daniel gave a faint smile without looking at her. "Habit." Lily tilted her head. "From what?" For a moment, Daniel considered ignoring the question. But something about the girl reminded him painfully of Sophie, especially the way her eyes carried warmth even in silence. Daniel finally answered softly, from a life where danger usually came from places people forgot to watch. Lily sat beside him on the cold bench outside the store while snowflakes drifted through the yellow streetlights. "Were you in the military?" she asked carefully. Daniel stared ahead at the traffic moving through the storm. "How did you know that?" "My dad was a Marine," Lily said quietly, "before he died." Something inside Daniel tightened painfully. What happened to him? Lily lowered her eyes. "Afghanistan." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The city noise seemed far away suddenly, buried beneath snowfall and memory. Then Lily whispered, "Mom says heroes don't always come home." Daniel swallowed hard before answering. "No," he said quietly. "Sometimes they come home, but part of them stays behind." From that day forward, Lily started waiting for him every afternoon. Sometimes they shared coffee and hot chocolate beside the convenience store, while traffic rushed through the evening streets. Sometimes she showed him school drawings while Daniel quietly repaired broken toys she found discarded near dumpsters. Other times they simply sat together in silence, watching snow or rain slide down windows beneath the glow of neon signs. For the first time in years, Daniel slowly began feeling something dangerous returning inside him. Hope. But hope frightened him more than loneliness ever had, because hope meant attachment, and attachment meant loss. One rainy evening in late October, Daniel noticed something unusual while cleaning near City Hall. Two black SUVs had been parked across the street for nearly 40 minutes, with engines still running, but nobody exited the vehicles. Daniel pretended to continue sweeping, while carefully watching the tinted windows through reflections in nearby glass storefronts. Old instincts never truly disappear. A tall man wearing a gray coat finally stepped out and handed a thick envelope to another man near the alley entrance before quickly returning to the SUV. The exchange lasted only seconds, but Daniel noticed the nervous body language immediately. Military experience teaches you how fear looks before words ever reveal it. As the vehicles drove away, Daniel quietly walked toward the alley, pretending to collect trash bags. Near the dumpster, he spotted a photograph partially sticking out beneath wet cardboard. Daniel froze when he picked it up. The photograph showed Mayor Olivia Bennett entering a fundraising gala. A red circle had been drawn around her face, and beneath the image were handwritten words. "Thursday, no mistakes." Daniel's pulse slowed instantly. Not faster, slower, the way it always did before danger. Rain poured harder around him as thunder rolled above the skyline. But Daniel remained completely still while staring at the photograph. Beneath flickering alley lights, someone was planning an assassination. And suddenly the peaceful invisibility he had spent years building around himself began collapsing, apart piece by piece. That night Daniel barely slept. He sat alone beside the motel window, staring at the photograph, while old memories returned like ghosts, crawling from darkness. His military instincts screamed at him to report the threat immediately, but another voice deep inside whispered something colder. "Stay out of it. You already lost everything once." The city outside glowed with distant sirens and headlights, while rain slid slowly down cracked glass. Daniel rubbed tired hands across his face. He was older now, slower, damaged. This was no longer his fight. But then he remembered Lily sitting beside him in the snow saying, "Heroes don't always come home." And for the first time in years, Daniel opened the metal box hidden beneath his mattress. Inside rested photographs from his military life, faded service medals, a folded American flag, and beneath them all, an old handgun wrapped carefully in cloth. Daniel stared at it for a long time without touching it. The next morning he visited the police anonymously, but the exhausted desk officer barely glanced at the blurry photograph before shrugging dismissively. "Could be anything," the officer muttered. "People send threats to politicians every week." Daniel leaned closer. "You don't understand." The officer sighed impatiently. "Sir, unless you have names, locations, or evidence beyond this, there's nothing we can do." Daniel walked out feeling cold frustration settling into his chest. He knew that tone. Bureaucracy, delay, disbelief. And deep down he also knew something else. If danger truly came Thursday night, Nobody would see it until it was too late. Thursday arrived beneath freezing rain and violent wind sweeping across downtown Chicago. The mayor's charity event attracted politicians, wealthy donors, media crews, and security teams surrounding the historic hotel, entrance with barricades and flashing lights. Daniel watched everything from across the street, while pretending to sweep leaves beside the curb. To everyone around him, he was invisible. Just an old sanitation worker in soaked boots and worn gloves. But his eyes constantly scanned windows, rooftops, parked vehicles, crowd movement, security gaps, patterns, angles, escape routes, the same way he had done overseas for years. Something felt wrong immediately. Too much movement on the upper buildings, too many blind spots. And then Daniel saw it. A faint silhouette shifting behind a rooftop ventilation unit across the street. Long object. Prone position. Rifle barrel. His entire body tensed instantly. At that exact moment, Mayor Olivia Bennett stepped out of the SUV smiling toward reporters, beneath camera flashes, completely unaware that death already watched her through a sniper scope. Daniel moved before thinking. The first gunshot exploded through the rain. Chaos erupted instantly. People screamed and ducked while Secret Service agents scrambled in confusion. But Daniel was already running directly toward the mayor as the second shot shattered marble behind him. "Down!" he roared. He slammed into Olivia Bennett, with enough force to knock both of them behind a concrete divider as shattered. Glass rained around them. Another bullet struck Daniel's shoulder. Pain exploded through his body, but adrenaline buried it instantly. The mayor stared at him in shock while agents surrounded them. Daniel grabbed one agent by the collar. "North rooftop," he barked. "Ventilation corner. Move now!" The agent hesitated only 1 second before realizing the old man was right. Within moments, armed teams stormed the building, while sirens screamed through downtown streets. Mayor Olivia Bennett stared at Daniel, with trembling eyes as blood soaked through his jacket. "Who are you?" she whispered. Daniel looked toward the rooftop one final time, before exhaustion began overtaking him. But before he could answer, something else caught his attention. Across the street, standing beneath flashing police lights and terrified crowds, Lily. Her frightened eyes locked onto Daniel as paramedics rushed toward him through the rain. And in that terrifying moment, Daniel realized something far worse than the sniper attack itself. Because standing several feet behind Lily, partially hidden beneath an umbrella, was the same gray-coated man Daniel had seen during the alley exchange days earlier. And he was staring directly at Lily with a cold smile on his face. Then the man slowly turned and disappeared into the crowd, before Daniel could even shout a warning. As darkness closed over him beneath the storming Chicago sky, Daniel understood one horrifying truth. This was never only about the mayor, and somehow, Lily was now part of it too.
The ambulance lights painted the rain-covered streets in violent flashes of red and blue while Daniel Brooks drifted in and out of consciousness. Beneath the sharp smell of blood, antiseptic and wet asphalt, and somewhere beyond the ringing inside his ears he could still hear Lily screaming his name as paramedics pushed her back behind police barricades, while cameras swarmed the entire block like vultures circling chaos. Every instinct inside Daniel fought against the darkness pulling at him because he knew one thing with terrifying certainty. Now, the sniper attack had failed, but whoever planned it was still out there. And the moment that gray-coated man looked at Lily, the danger stopped being political and became deeply personal. The paramedic pressed hard against Daniel's wounded shoulder while the ambulance sped through downtown traffic. "Stay awake, sir," the paramedic ordered. "You're losing blood." Daniel grabbed the man's wrist weakly. "The girl," he muttered painfully. "Brown hair, blue hoodie. Find her." "Sir, focus on yourself right now." Daniel's breathing became uneven. "You don't understand," he whispered. "She's in danger." But the sirens drowned his words as the ambulance disappeared into the storm. 2 hours later, Daniel woke inside a dim hospital room with sharp pain, burning through his shoulder and rain, tapping softly against the windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. The room smelled sterile and cold, but military hospitals had taught him how to wake quickly no matter how injured he was. His eyes immediately scanned exits, corners, shadows, movement, habit, survival. A police officer stood outside the room, while nurses moved quietly through the hallway beyond him. Daniel slowly sat upright despite the pain tearing through his arm. And then he noticed someone sitting silently in the chair near the window. Mayor Olivia Bennett, She no longer looked like the polished politician from television, interviews and press conferences. Without cameras surrounding her, she looked exhausted, frightened, and strangely human beneath the pale hospital lighting. Her dark coat rested folded across her lap while her hands trembled slightly around a paper coffee cup she hadn't touched. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Rain slid slowly down the glass behind her. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. "You saved my life." Daniel leaned back carefully against the bed. "Looks like it." Her eyes remained fixed on him. "The Secret Service reviewed security footage," she said quietly. "You spotted the sniper nearly 20 seconds before anyone else." Daniel said nothing. Olivia continued softly. "That's not normal awareness for a street cleaner." Daniel looked toward the window. "I used to do different work." Olivia studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "They told me your name after they ran fingerprints at the hospital." Her voice lowered slightly. "Daniel Brooks." Daniel's jaw tightened instantly. He hated hearing that name spoken aloud now, because it belonged to a man he buried years ago. Olivia leaned forward slowly. "You were Delta Force." "Not a question. A fact." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "Long time ago." "My father served," Olivia said quietly. "I know what those units are." Silence filled the room again. Then Olivia asked the question he had dreaded most. "Why were you cleaning streets?" Daniel stared at the ceiling for several seconds before answering. "Because when you lose enough people," he said softly, "eventually you stop caring where life leaves you." Something painful moved behind Olivia's expression. Not pity, understanding. Before she could respond, the hospital room door suddenly opened and 2 federal agents entered, carrying folders and grim expressions. "Ma'am," one agent said carefully, "we need to relocate you immediately." Olivia frowned. "Why?" The agent exchanged uneasy glances with his partner. "Because the sniper is dead." Daniel's eyes narrowed instantly. "Dead how?" The agent hesitated. "Execution style. Single gunshot to the head before tactical teams reached him." Daniel's stomach tightened coldly. "Professional cleanup," which meant organization, planning, resources. This was far bigger than a lone assassin. The second agent stepped forward. "And there's something else." He opened a folder slowly. "We identified the rifle. Military-grade modifications. Black market custom work." Daniel already knew what came next before the words arrived. These weapons were previously connected to a private security contractor under federal investigation 6 years ago. Daniel's pulse slowed dangerously because he remembered that contractor. Iron Horizon, a covert military company that operated in gray areas overseas where governments wanted problems erased quietly without accountability. Daniel had crossed paths with them during classified operations years earlier, and he remembered exactly what kind of men worked there. Cold men, efficient men, men who treated human life like paperwork. Olivia noticed the change in Daniel's face immediately. "You know them." Daniel looked directly at her. "They don't miss targets," he said quietly. Not twice. Fear settled visibly across the room. The agents exchanged nervous glances. One of them finally asked, "Mr. Brooks, why would a contractor like Iron Horizon target the mayor?" Daniel answered without hesitation, "Money." The room fell silent. Daniel continued carefully. "Nobody hires people like that for politics. Somebody powerful wants something stopped." Olivia stared at him. "What exactly am I stopping?" Before Daniel could answer, his phone buzzed quietly on the bedside table. An unknown number. Every instinct inside him screamed instantly. Daniel answered slowly. "Hello?" For several seconds there was only static. Then a calm male voice spoke. "You should have stayed invisible, Daniel." Ice spread through his chest. The voice continued. "You were given a second chance to disappear after Denver. Most men would have taken it." Daniel's grip tightened around the phone. "How do you know that name?" Soft laughter answered him. "Because some ghosts never stop watching." Then the line disconnected. Daniel stared at the dark screen, while every memory he spent years burying suddenly returned with horrifying clarity. Denver, 12 years earlier, the mission that destroyed everything. Olivia watched him carefully. What was Denver? Daniel remained silent, because even now the memories still felt poisoned. But deep down he knew silence was no longer protecting anyone, especially Lily. Daniel slowly looked toward the agents. "There's a girl," he said firmly. 10 years old, Lily Carter. I need protective surveillance on her immediately." The agents frowned in confusion. "Why would—" "Because whoever called me knows I care about her." The room became tense instantly. One agent nodded and stepped outside to make the call. But 15 minutes later, he returned with a look that drained all remaining color from Daniel's face. "We sent officers to the address." The agent swallowed hard. The apartment was empty. Daniel sat upright instantly despite the pain ripping through his shoulder. What do you mean empty? The mother never came home from work tonight. The agent hesitated, and neighbors said they saw Lily leave with a man about an hour ago. Olivia whispered, "Oh my God." Daniel's heartbeat became terrifyingly calm. Not panic, combat calm, the dangerous kind. What man? The agent opened his notebook slowly. Gray coat, mid-50s. Daniel closed his eyes. Too late. He had already reached her. The hospital suddenly felt too small for the violence, building inside Daniel's chest. He ripped the IV from his arm and swung his legs off the bed. The agents immediately stepped forward. "Mr. Brooks, you're injured." Daniel ignored them completely while grabbing his clothes. Olivia stood quickly. "Daniel, where are you going?" He looked directly at her. "To finish what started tonight." Rain hammered. Chicago harder than ever as Daniel stepped out of the hospital less than 20 minutes later wearing borrowed clothes and a bandage, soaked faintly red beneath his jacket. Olivia followed him into the underground parking garage, despite every agent warning her not to. "Daniel," she called out. "You can barely stand." Daniel stopped beside a black SUV. "Yes, I can." Olivia walked closer carefully. "You're not going alone." Daniel almost laughed at that. "You have no idea what this is." "Then tell me." For several seconds he said nothing. Then finally, the wall he spent years building around himself cracked open slightly. 12 years ago, Daniel said quietly, my unit uncovered evidence that Iron Horizon was smuggling weapons overseas through humanitarian supply routes. Civilians were dying because of it, children. His jaw tightened painfully. We were ordered to ignore it. Olivia listened silently. But my team didn't ignore it, Daniel continued. We gathered evidence, names, financial records, enough to destroy powerful people. What happened? Daniel stared into the rain falling beyond the garage entrance. Someone betrayed us. His voice lowered. The mission in Denver was supposed to be a secure handoff with federal investigators. He swallowed hard. Instead, it became an ambush. The memory burned behind his eyes now. Gunfire, smoke, blood, screaming. My entire team was killed, Daniel whispered, and the evidence disappeared. Olivia's expression softened with horror. You survived. Daniel nodded faintly. Barely. And after that? Daniel looked at her with exhausted eyes. After that? My wife and daughter died 6 months later. Realization slowly crossed Olivia's face. You think it wasn't an accident? Daniel said nothing, because deep down he had always known. Olivia's voice became barely audible. My God, a black sedan suddenly entered the garage, fast enough to make tires screech against concrete. Both Daniel and Olivia reacted instantly. Daniel shoved her behind a pillar as the sedan stopped violently nearby. But instead of gunmen, a terrified woman stumbled out crying. Lily's mother. Rachel Carter. Rain soaked her diner uniform while panic shattered her entire body. Please, she screamed. Please help my daughter. Daniel rushed toward her. Rachel, what happened? She grabbed his jacket desperately. A man came to the diner tonight asking questions about you, she sobbed. He knew Lily's name. He knew everything. Daniel's face hardened. Where is she? Rachel fought to breathe through tears. He took her. The garage fell deathly silent. Rachel reached into her pocket with trembling hands and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He said to give this to Daniel Brooks. Daniel unfolded it slowly. Only one sentence was written inside. Come alone if you want the girl alive. Below the message was an address near the abandoned shipping yards by Lake Michigan. Olivia looked up immediately. It's a try. Daniel folded the paper calmly. Yes. You can't go alone. Daniel looked toward the storm outside. I already know. Then something unexpected happened. Mayor Olivia Bennett stepped closer and quietly said, I have something you need to see. 30 minutes later, Daniel sat inside a secure underground office beneath City Hall while Olivia unlocked an old steel cabinet, hidden behind shelves of archived documents. She removed a thick classified file and placed it carefully on the table. Daniel opened it slowly, and the moment he saw the photographs inside, his blood turned cold, because staring back at him was the face of the gray-coated man, older now, but unmistakable. Olivia spoke softly. His name is Victor Kane. Daniel's hands froze. No P. Impossible. Victor Kane had officially died 11 years earlier during an overseas operation. But Daniel knew that face better than anyone alive, because Victor Kane had once been his commanding officer, and the man Daniel trusted more than his own brother. Olivia continued carefully. He currently operates private political security contracts under a different identity. Federal agencies suspect he's connected to multiple disappearances, assassinations, and blackmail operations. Daniel could barely breathe now, because suddenly everything made horrifying sense. The betrayal, the ambush, the missing evidence, even Emily and Sophie. Victor Kane had orchestrated all of it, and now he had Lily. Olivia looked at Daniel carefully across the dim underground office. Why would he keep you alive all these years? Daniel stared at Victor's photograph, while old grief slowly transformed into something colder, something dangerous. Finally, he answered in a voice barely above a whisper, because he wanted me to suffer first. Thunder shook the building above them. Rain battered the city endlessly outside, and somewhere in the darkness near the abandoned docks of Lake Michigan, a terrified little girl waited alone with a monster Daniel once called family. The abandoned shipping yards near Lake Michigan looked like a graveyard, built from rust and shadows, where thousands of silent cargo containers stood stacked beneath freezing rain while broken. Floodlights flickered weakly across puddles black, enough to resemble oil. And as Daniel Brooks drove through the empty industrial road shortly after midnight with Chicago's distant skyline glowing faintly behind him like another world entirely, he felt something inside himself, returning that he thought had died. Years ago in the deserts and ruined. Cities overseas. Not rage, not fear. Purpose. The old black pickup truck Olivia Bennett arranged for him rattled softly beneath the storm while Daniel checked the handgun resting beside him for the third time. His wounded shoulder burned with every movement, but pain had become familiar long ago. The deeper wound lived elsewhere, in memory, in regret, in all the years he spent hiding from the man waiting for him tonight. Daniel parked nearly half a mile from the shipping yard entrance and continued on foot through rain and darkness, moving carefully between stacked containers while freezing winds swept across the lake hard enough to cut through clothing. Every sound mattered now, every reflection, every shadow. Victor Kane would expect him angry, emotional, reckless. Daniel intended to be none of those things. As he moved deeper into the yard, he noticed subtle signs immediately. Fresh tire tracks. Recently cut fencing. Hidden surveillance cameras positioned near elevated cranes. Victor had transformed the entire area into a controlled kill zone. Classic military containment strategy. Daniel almost smiled bitterly. Some habits never change. A faint sound suddenly drifted through the storm. Music. Soft piano music echoing somewhere in the darkness. Daniel froze instantly because he recognized the melody. Clair de Lune. Emily used to play it constantly while cooking dinner late at night years ago before everything fell apart. Victor knew that, which meant this wasn't only psychological warfare, this was personal cruelty. Daniel followed the music carefully until he finally spotted a dimly lit warehouse near the water's edge. Two armed men guarded the entrance, beneath hanging floodlights, while rain hammered the metal roof above them. Daniel studied their movement patterns silently from behind stacked containers. Private contractors, not soldiers. Sloppy posture, overconfident. Victor always preferred hiring men desperate for money instead of loyalty. Daniel moved fast. The first guard never even saw him coming. Daniel wrapped one arm around the man's throat from behind and slammed him, unconscious against the container wall, before lowering the body quietly into darkness. The second guard turned too late after hearing movement, but Daniel disarmed him within seconds and drove him hard into the wet pavement. The man groaned painfully. Daniel pressed the handgun against his neck. How many inside? Please, the man stammered. Daniel's voice remained calm. How many? 6, the guard whispered shakily. Plus Kane. And the girl? The man hesitated. Daniel pressed harder. Top office level, the guard gasped. North side. Daniel knocked him unconscious instantly. Then he entered the warehouse. The inside smelled of salt water, oil, and rusting machinery while Clair de Lune continued echoing softly through hidden speakers above the darkness. Large cargo crates created narrow pathways between pools of shadow, while rain leaked through holes in the roof. Daniel moved like a ghost through the maze, silent, controlled, precise. The first 2 contractors died before realizing anyone was inside. One collapsed beside a forklift after Daniel snapped his neck from behind. The second reached for his weapon too slowly. Gunfire exploded once through the warehouse, before silence swallowed everything again. Above him, footsteps suddenly erupted across metal catwalks. Voices shouted. Daniel moved instantly. Bullets tore through darkness around him while sparks exploded from steel. Beams overhead. But Daniel kept advancing through cover with terrifying efficiency. Born from decades of survival, every movement felt automatic now, like reopening a locked part of himself buried beneath years of pretending to be broken. One contractor rushed down the stairs firing wildly. Daniel shot him twice in the chest without slowing down. Another appeared behind stacked crates. Daniel disarmed him, slammed his head into metal, and continued forward. Within less than 2 minutes, the warehouse became silent except for rain and distant piano music. Daniel climbed the metal staircase toward the upper office level while blood dripped slowly from his wounded shoulder onto rusted steps. Then he heard it. Lily crying softly somewhere nearby. "Daniel?" His chest tightened instantly. "I'm here," he called quietly. A small, frightened sob answered him. "Daniel, I'm scared." Daniel followed the voice down a narrow hallway lined with broken windows, overlooking the storm outside. At the very end stood a single office illuminated by warm yellow light, and inside the doorway, Victor Kane waited calmly beside Lily. The years had changed him physically, but not spiritually. His hair had turned gray around the edges and deep scars crossed one side of his face now, but his eyes remained exactly the same, cold, intelligent, unreadable, predator eyes. Lily sat tied gently to a chair nearby, frightened tears streaking her face but physically unharmed. Victor smiled faintly when he saw Daniel. "You're slower than you used to be." Daniel raised the handgun carefully. "Let her go." Victor glanced at Lily almost affectionately. "She reminds me of Sophie." The name hit Daniel like a knife. "Don't say her name." Victor sighed softly. "You know, Daniel, grief ruined you." His voice remained strangely calm. "You were the best operative I ever commanded, focused, fearless, disciplined." He tilted his head slightly. "Then your family died and suddenly you wanted morality." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You murdered my team." Victor smiled faintly. "Your team became inconvenient." "And Emily?" Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "Sophie?" For the first time, Victor's expression showed something almost resembling regret. "That wasn't supposed to happen." Daniel's entire body went still. Victor continued quietly. "The driver only intended to scare them. Push you away from the investigation permanently." His eyes lowered briefly. "But alcohol and fear make men careless." Something inside Daniel shattered completely. All these years, all this pain, not random, not fate, designed. Victor watched the devastation move across Daniel's face and spoke softly. "That's why I kept you alive afterward. I thought eventually you'd understand how the world really works." He stepped closer slowly. "Governments need men like us. Dirty men willing to protect stability no matter the cost." Daniel stared at him with hollow disbelief. "You killed children." Victor answered without hesitation. "And presidents shake hands with worse men every day." Silence filled the office except for rain striking broken windows. Lily looked toward Daniel, trembling. "Please don't leave me." Daniel's eyes softened instantly. "I won't." Victor noticed the change immediately and smiled. "There it is," he whispered. "The weakness." Without warning, Victor pulled a handgun from beneath his coat and aimed directly at Lily's head. Daniel reacted instantly. Gunfire exploded through the office. The shot struck Daniel low in the stomach before he could fully fire back, throwing him hard against the wall while Lily screamed in terror. Pain tore through his body like fire. Victor stepped forward calmly. "You should have stayed invisible." Daniel struggled to breathe while blood spread rapidly across the floor beneath him. Victor pointed the gun toward his head now. "For what it's worth," Victor said quietly. "I truly did love you like a son once." Then another gunshot exploded through the office. Victor staggered violently sideways. Shock crossed his face. A dark stain spread slowly across his chest. Behind him, standing in the shattered doorway with trembling hands gripping a pistol, Mayor Olivia Bennett. Victor stared at her in disbelief. Olivia's eyes burned with fury and fear. "You don't get to decide who deserves to live." Victor tried raising his weapon again, but Olivia fired a second time, then a third. Victor collapsed, heavily beside the rain-covered windows, while thunder shook the warehouse around them. For several seconds, nobody moved. Lily cried uncontrollably. Daniel struggled desperately to stay conscious while Olivia rushed toward him. "You idiot," she whispered through tears. "You really thought I'd let you come here alone?" Daniel tried to laugh, but blood filled his mouth instead. Olivia dropped beside him, pressing trembling hands against his wound. No. Stay with me." Daniel looked weakly toward Lily. "She okay?" Lily ran into Daniel's arms despite the blood and chaos around them. "You came back," she sobbed. "You promised." Daniel held her gently, despite the agony ripping through his body. "Always." Sirens finally echoed outside the warehouse as federal agents stormed the shipping yard beneath flashing lights and rain. But Daniel barely heard them anymore. His vision blurred heavily now. Olivia leaned close desperately. "Stay awake, Daniel." He looked at her faintly. "Didn't think politicians carried guns." Olivia laughed painfully through tears. "My father taught me." Daniel's eyes slowly drifted toward the storm outside the shattered windows where Lake Michigan churned violently beneath distant city lights. Strangely, he felt peaceful for the first time in years. Because Lily was safe. Because Victor was gone. Because maybe, just maybe, Emily and Sophie could finally rest too. Weeks later, spring sunlight slowly began replacing winter across Chicago, while newspapers across America carried the same unbelievable headline: Homeless street cleaner saves mayor during assassination attempt. But most articles still failed to capture the truth. They spoke about heroism, courage, military service, yet none of them truly understood the quiet loneliness Daniel Brooks carried for years, beneath invisible scars nobody could see. After surgery and weeks of recovery, Daniel stood quietly one afternoon beside Lake Michigan, watching sunlight dance across the water while the city moved peacefully behind him. He wore simple clothes now instead of the old sanitation jacket, though his posture remained the same, strong, alert, weathered. Lily sat beside him eating ice cream, while Olivia approached slowly carrying coffee cups. "You know," Olivia said softly, "the city council wants to honor you publicly." Daniel smiled faintly. "That sounds terrible." Olivia laughed gently before handing him coffee. "You could also say no." Daniel looked toward the skyline. "For years I thought disappearing was easier," he admitted quietly. "I thought staying invisible protected people." Lily tugged softly on his sleeve. "But you saved people because you stopped hiding." Daniel looked down at her. "Children sometimes speak truths. Adults spend entire lives avoiding." Olivia leaned against the railing beside him. "What will you do now?" Daniel stared across the water for a long moment before answering. "Maybe stop surviving." A faint smile touched his face. "And start living again." The wind carried silence gently between them, while boats drifted slowly across the lake beneath. Golden evening light. For the first time in years, Daniel no longer felt haunted by ghosts standing behind him. Because sometimes life gives broken people one final chance to return from darkness. Not through revenge, not through violence, but through kindness, through protecting someone else when it would be easier to walk away. And maybe that's the strangest truth about heroes. The world usually overlooks them completely until the exact moment someone needs saving.